My daughter called me on a Tuesday evening and her voice was bright and wrong, like a smile held too long for a photograph. Her husband was somewhere in the room. I could hear him being nearby, if that makes sense. And after 2 minutes of weather and nothing, my Aaron said 9 words that no one else on earth would have noticed. Dad, do you still have Mom's lemon bar recipe? I'm Roy. I'm 71. I spent 32 years as a fire captain, and I have run into a few burning buildings, and I'm telling you that no alarm bell I ever heard rang louder than that recipe. Because that sentence was a code my late wife invented when Aaron was 15, a code that had been sitting silent for 19 years, waiting like a smoke detector in a house that never burned. It means, I need out, and I can't say it out loud. 11 days later, I stood on my daughter's front porch while her husband filled the doorway with his arms crossed and said, "She's not leaving this house." And I looked at that man, and friends, I want you to remember, all the way to the end, that I'd had 11 days, and I'm a man who ran 3 decades of emergencies for a living. And I said, the calmest sentence of my life, I know. That's why I didn't come alone. He thought I meant the car behind me. He hadn't seen the second one yet. Stay with me. This is the one where the old man is nobody's victim. Let me take you back to where the code comes from, because my wife Jean is the real author of this story, and she's been gone 6 years, and she still outplanned everybody in it. I fought fires, Jean fought everything else. She was a pediatric nurse, and pediatric nurses, friends, are what happens when you distill a mother down to pure grain alcohol. Jean believed in prevention, the way I believed in ventilation. You make your openings before the smoke, not after. So when Aaron turned 15 and started going to parties, Jean sat her down at our kitchen table and said, "Here's the deal. If you're ever somewhere you need to leave, a party, a car, anywhere, and you can't say so out loud, you call home and you ask me for the lemon bar recipe. That's all. No questions, no lecture, no trouble. One of us will be outside in 20 minutes, and the official story is that you had to come home to help me bake." Aaron used it twice in high school. Once at 16, a party that had turned into the wrong kind of party, and once at 17, a boy with a car and a bad idea. Both times, the phone rang, the code came, and one of us was idling at a curb inside of 20 minutes, and nobody in that car said one word about it unless Aaron started. That was the design, Jean's design, an exit with no shame attached because, and I'm quoting my wife, and you can carve this one with the other rules the wives of this channel have left behind, nobody uses a fire escape that makes them fill out a form. Aaron grew up, the code went to sleep. Jean passed 6 years ago, her heart on the back porch with a crossword half done, and our daughter became a surgical nurse with her mother's spine, and for a while, friends, the story looked finished and happy. Then she brought home Brent. I want to be careful and honest in this part, more careful than usual, because I know who watches this channel, and I know that for some of you, this next stretch is not a story. So I'm going to describe exactly what I saw, in the order I saw it, and if any of it rhymes with a house you know, hold on to the end, because the end has doors in it. Brent was a sales director. Firm handshake, gym shoulders, laughed at my jokes a half-second before the punchline. At the wedding, he gave a toast about how Aaron had finally found someone to take care of her, and the room applauded, and I applauded, and somewhere in the applause, I remember one cold drop of something I couldn't name, watching my self-rescuing daughter be described as a package that had finally been delivered. Here is what the next 3 years looked like from a father's distance. Each item, by itself, defensible. That's the design of it. They moved 40 minutes away, closer to Brent's territory. The 40 minutes became the reason for everything after. Erin left the hospital. The commute plus the shifts. It just doesn't make sense after taxes, Dad. We did the math. We did the math. My daughter loved that job the way I loved the firehouse, and it went away in one sentence about taxes. Her phone became a family plan. His account, location sharing on, for safety. Her old friends thinned out. Every one of them, I'd learn, had been rude to Brent at some point, and every rudeness carried a quiet toll paid in distance. Her car got traded for one lease in one name, his, because insurance is cheaper that way. And the visits, Sundays with me went to every other, then monthly, then to phone calls. Phone calls with a strange new rhythm, where my daughter's voice had a slight delay in it, like an overseas broadcast, and I finally understood the delay. She was checking her sentences with a listener before releasing them. Friends, Brent never hit my daughter. I want to say that plainly, because when this all came apart, that was his flag, his fortress, the thing he said to me on the porch with his arms crossed. I have never laid a hand on her, as if the absence of bruises was a marriage. Men like Brent don't leave marks, they leave rules. Rules about money, about miles, about minutes, about which version of the weather she was allowed to report on the phone to her own father. A bruise heals in 2 weeks and testifies for you in any courtroom in the country. A rule can run for years and photograph like a happy home. By this last year, my daughter, surgical nurse, spine of Jean, had no job, no car, no money in her own name, no friends inside 40 minutes, and a phone that reported her location to her husband. Every wall of that building was up before anyone smelled smoke, and on a Tuesday in March, my phone rang, and a bright, wrong voice asked me for her mother's lemon bar recipe. Now, here's where 32 years of fires either pay off or they don't. Because every cell in my body wanted to drive 40 minutes that night and carry my daughter out over my shoulder. And if you've been with this channel for long, you know the oldest lesson in our whole catalog. The loudest move is almost never the right one. But this episode's version of that lesson I didn't learn from a wife's rule or a lawyer's letter. I learned it at 2 a.m. from a woman named Donna Pruitt, and I'm going to give you her words nearly verbatim because somebody watching needs them more than they need my plot. Donna runs the County Family Crisis Center. I've known her since the 90s. Fire and crisis share a dispatch desk, and I'd carried people out of buildings and handed them to Donna's people more times than I can count. I called her the night of the lemon bars, and the first thing she said, before hello was fully out of my mouth, was, "Roy, whatever you're about to do tonight, don't." And then, calm as a checklist, listen to me like it's a fire. The most dangerous day in a controlling marriage is leaving day, not the years before, the day. The moment he understands he's losing control is the moment the rules stop being enough for him. So we don't rescue on impulse, Roy. We rescue on schedule, her schedule. She called you with a code instead of a suitcase. That tells me she already knows this. Your job is not to be the hero at the door. Your job is to be the plan behind it. So we planned, friends. 11 days. I'll give you the plan the way I'd give a rookie a walkthrough, because Donna tells me the plan is the most useful thing this story can carry. Day 1 and 2. Contact. Safely. Erin's phone was watched, so the phone was dead to us. But Brent had one blind spot. Me, the harmless old man. And harmless old men are allowed to bring baked goods. I made Jean's lemon bars. I made them badly, friends. I burned 2 batches to charcoal, and I could feel Jean supervising from the ceiling with her arms crossed. But the 3rd batch was presentable, and I drove out on Sunday like a doting fool, and under the foil, beneath the parchment, Taped flat to the bottom of the tin was a phone. Prepaid, charged, one number saved. Erin hugged me at her door, Brent watching from the couch, half up, host smile on. And my daughter took that tin, and I watched her feel the weight of it, feel that it was a half-pound heavy, and meet my eyes for 1/4 of 1 second. 19 years since the last lemon bar call. She knew. Of course she knew. It was her mother's tin. Days 3 through 9. The quiet inventory. Erin, on grocery trips, her one unescorted hour, and he tracked even that by the receipts, photographed documents with the burner, and left them in a drafts folder. Marriage certificate. Her passport, which lived in HI's office safe, but the safe stood open on Thursdays when he did expenses. Bank statements for accounts she was on but couldn't touch. Donna's people turned the drafts folder into a file. A protective order petition took shape in an office 40 minutes from Brent's rules, without one sheet of paper entering his house. Day 10 was the call I need a whole chapter for, and day 11 was supposed to be day 14. But plans, like buildings, meet fire on the fire's schedule. Day 11, at 4:40 in the afternoon, the burner phone in my kitchen buzzed once, with the message Donna had scripted and Erin had memorized. 3 words. Lemon bars. Now. Let me back up. 48 hours. To day 10, and the phone call I'd been circling all week, like a man circling a cold pool. Because there was a hole in our plan, and the hole had a name. Afterward. Donna's people could get Erin out. The deputy could keep the peace at the door. The county does this, friends. It's called a civil standby, an officer present while a person retrieves themselves and their belongings. And if you remember nothing else tonight, remember that this exists, and it's a phone call away. But Brent was a salesman with a spotless flag, never laid a hand on her, and men like that don't lose in the doorway. They lose the doorway and then spend 2 years winning the story, calling her unstable, calling me senile, working the family, the church, the cul-de-sac, until the woman who escaped is somehow the villain of her own rescue. Unless the one audience that mattered most to him had already heard the truth from the right voice. Brent had a father, Vern. I'd met him twice. The wedding, a christening, a retired machinist with hands like mine and quiet eyes that I'd noticed, both times, went a little flat when his son held court. You learn to read fathers' eyes at the height of their sons' toasts. There's pride and there's hope, and they don't look the same. I called Vern on day 10, longest number I ever dialed, and I'll tell you what I said, because if you're ever the one making this call, the order matters. I didn't start with his son. I started with my daughter, the job she gave up, the friends that thinned, the car, the phone, the delay in her sentences, just the inventory, no adjectives, one father to another. And then I stopped talking, which is the hardest technique I know. The silence went so long I checked the phone was alive. And then Vern said quietly, "The sentences, with the delay." Another silence. His mother used to talk like that, to my father. And then this man I'd met twice took a breath that I could hear 70 miles away, carrying about 50 years in it, and said, "What day, and where do you want me standing?" Friends, I have run into buildings that were actively on fire, and I am telling you, the bravest thing I have personally witnessed was a 68-year-old machinist agreeing, in under 4 minutes, to stand in a driveway against his own son. We talk a lot on this channel about the family that fails you. Tonight, put one on the board for the family that doesn't. Day 11. 4:40 p.m., the burner buzzes. Lemon bars, now. The trigger, I'd learn, was small, and it was everything. Brent, doing Thursday expenses a day early, had found the grocery receipts didn't match the mileage, and the temperature of the house had changed, and my daughter looked at the man calculating her miles and decided the schedule had arrived. I made 2 calls from the truck, Donna's line and Vern, and I drove 40 minutes at a fire captain's definition of the speed limit, and I walked up that flagstone path at 5:26 p.m., alone, ahead of everyone, because that was the plan too. Let him see the harmless old man first. Let him think this is the whole cavalry. The door opened before I knocked. Brent filled it. Sales floor smile, Jim's shoulders, forearms crossed like a man modeling a watch. And behind him, down the hallway, I could see my daughter standing by 2 packed bags, and she was upright. Friends, chin level, her mother's spine fully load-bearing, and the sight of that put 10 years back on my life. "Roy," Brent said, warm as a receipt, "this is silly. Erin's upset. We had a talk about some receipts. It's a marriage thing. I have never laid a hand on her, and she's not going anywhere. She's not leaving this house. There it is, friends." The title of tonight's story, delivered with a smile, in a doorway, by a man who still believed he was the biggest thing in the frame. And I stood on that porch, 71 years old, hands loose at my sides the way you keep them when everything depends on staying boring, and I said, "I know. That's why I didn't come alone." He laughed. He actually laughed, and leaned to look past me at my empty truck, and that's when the first set of headlights came up the street. Deputy Ortiz, county cruiser, no sirens, parking across the driveway's mouth with the unhurried geometry of a man who's done 400 of these. Civil standby. Brent's smile recalibrated. I watched the salesman in him reprice the room, and he started the speech. The flag. "Officer, there's no issue here. I've never once laid a hand." And the second set of headlights pulled in. And friends, I have seen men lose fights. In 32 years around emergencies, you see men lose fights, lose houses, lose everything. I had never, until that evening, seen a man lose his entire operating system in the time it takes a truck door to shut. Because Vern came up that flagstone path with his hands in his jacket pockets, and he didn't look at me, and he didn't look at the deputy. He looked at his son the way you look at a leak you knew about and painted over, and he said, quiet, level, a machinist reading a measurement, "Step away from the door, son." Brent said, "Dad?" And Vern said, "I talked to Roy Tuesday. I've had 2 days to decide whose father I'm going to be tonight. Step away from the door." And my son-in-law, the biggest thing in every frame for 3 years, got small, not dramatically, incrementally, shoulder by shoulder, the way a tire goes down. He stepped back from his doorway, and my daughter walked out of that house past him, 2 bags and her chin level, and she did not run to me, friends. I want this on the record. She walked, at her own speed, on her own schedule, exactly as designed, and the deputy stood boring witness, and Vern stood in the yard with his hands in his pockets, guarding the whole scene from the only direction it could still burn. Erin stopped at the truck, looked back once, not at Brent, at the house. Buildings you can grieve. Then she got in and asked me, in a voice I hadn't heard undelayed in 3 years, "Did you actually bring lemon bars?" I had, friends. 4th batch. On the seat, slightly burned. We ate them in the driveway of a gas station 11 miles up the road, and my daughter laughed and cried at the same time, with powdered sugar on her hands. And that, and not the doorway, is the moment I'd frame if you could frame moments. The aftermath, plainly, the way this channel does it. The protective order went through inside the week. Donna's file, 11 days in the making, did in one hearing what Impulse would have spent 2 years failing to do. The financial untangling took longer. Control leaves a longer paper trail than love does. Erin was back at her hospital within 2 months. They'd never really filled her shoes, and she lives 20 minutes from me now, in an apartment where every account, every lease, and every device answers to exactly one name. Brent ran the campaign we expected. The calls, the version, she was struggling. The old man never liked me. It lasted 11 days, which has become my lucky number, because the audience he built his whole life for wasn't buying. It's hard to sell She's Unstable when your own father attends her housewarming, friends, and Vern did, with a toolbox, and hung every picture in that apartment level to the 16th of an inch. He and I have a standing coffee now, Thursdays. Two old men, one lesson, from opposite ends of it. We don't talk about the doorway much. We mostly argue about pliers and the recipe. A few weeks in, Erin asked to actually learn it, the real lemon bars, properly. The two of us in my kitchen with Jean's recipe box down off the shelf for the first time in 6 years. And my daughter pulled the index card, in her mother's handwriting, flower ghosts on the corners, and went quiet, and handed it to me. Because at the bottom of the recipe, under the last step, in the nurse's shorthand printing I'd know anywhere, my Jean had written, who knows what year, who knows how long it waited, for emergencies. 6 years gone, friends, and still running the checklist. The wives of this channel, I've stopped being surprised. I've started taking notes. Here's tonight's lesson, and for once it comes in 2 sizes. The small size for every parent and grandparent listening. Build the code now, tonight. The lemon bars, the 2 squeezes, whatever your family's version is, a door out with no shame on the handle, installed years before the smoke. Fire escapes get built on sunny days. That's the whole trick of them. And the big size, and I'm going to say this one carefully, if the middle of this story rhymed with your house, the rules, the miles, the delay in your own sentences, then hear Donna, not just Roy. You rescue on schedule, and there are people whose entire job is leaving day. Advocates, hotlines, civil standbys. The plan is a phone call away, and the plan is what works. You are not dramatic, you are not imagining it, and you are allowed to ask somebody for the recipe. Now, the comments, and this week's is a real dispute because Donna herself says I gambled, calling Vern before leaving day. If I'd read his eyes wrong, if he'd been a different kind of father, I'd have handed Brent a 2-day warning. Team call the father, or team too risky? And tell me this, without details, does your family have a code? Don't post the code, obviously, just tell me it exists. I want to count them. I read every single comment. And if you believe the quiet ones see everything, subscribe, because next Sunday is the one this whole channel has been walking toward. A family stands up in a courtroom and declares an old man mentally unfit. And his grandson stands up and asks the judge to play one video. Bring the good scotch. It's the finale of the 10. Take care of each other and write for emergencies on something. You won't be there when it's read. That's the point.